If you ever find yourself thinking in your own head, man, why didn't I just follow my instincts? Or if you find yourself kind of talking out of your ass when you talk about a subject that you're passionate about, this is 100% the episode of Better for You. Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Better, do better, be better, make the world a better place. That's our motto. That's what we're trying to do here. And I'm going to try approaching this one from a different standpoint than most of the solo podcasts I've done. I have a great Better moment from Sebastian Roché coming up, so you got to check that out. Kind of works into the topic of today's discussion or today's rant, I guess, since it's only me. I'm not really discussing this with anybody. But I want to just mention quickly, betterpodcast.live. That's our website. I'm not going to ramble off all of our social media, all the places you can subscribe to us, because it's all right there. Okay. It's got everything about us. It's got our teaser trailer, our sizzlers, all of our episodes across Apple, Spotify, YouTube. It's got all of our social media. We're in the middle of actually moving over from my personal social media to a dedicated social media for Better, dedicated YouTube and everything, because we're growing. And I didn't actually expect this to ever grow. I just did it for fun. I did it for personal therapy. I did it to have conversations with people I may not normally have conversations with. And also because I work a lot. So I don't get to have really stimulating conversations since I work alone. So betterpodcast.live, that's our website. I would really appreciate, and I would put positive vibes out to the universe for you if you would go there and on your preferred channel, give us a sub or a follow. Watch, listen to what we have for content. And if it helps you, if you get some value from it, leave a comment, share it, all those sorts of things. All right. So this episode is going to be in story format. I'm going to be doing a few of these where I'm going to walk you through a story about my life that led to me doing better. And this one, so sometimes these are going to be humorous. Sometimes they'll be very serious. Sometimes they'll be disturbing. Sometimes they'll be enlightening. And this is probably the latter. This is going to be the enlightening one. I'm going to talk to you about learning and instinct. And I'm going to use an example of writing, my writing in my life, to tell you this story. So I'll tell you the story and then I'll get into what it meant. When I was, I've mentioned this a couple times on the podcast, but when I was in junior high, I had an English teacher. Her name was Mrs. Dantura. And she would give us writing challenges, poems, songs, short stories, things like that. And you'd have to go up in front of the class and you'd have to tell people, read it out. And I, at the time, was a very shy kid. Getting in front of a crowd was a crowd of especially of your peers, that a large percentage of them tormented you. It was a big ask. And I remember the first one. I don't know why I remember. I guess it was the defining moment in my life. But I remember there was this, with the first one, I had to think of something that I could feel comfortable enough talking about. And I had just experienced the death of my grandfather. I had, through that whole thing, I watched my dad kind of decline in terms of, his interaction with the world. We moved into this small town that was not at all my flavor. I was a hip hop and basketball / football kid. They were all hockey and country kids. So needless to say, my life was thrown into a tailspin at a young age. And my grandfather dying had me asking a lot of questions about death. Because I remember when my parents told me my grandfather died, called my papa. When I remember them sitting me down to tell me that he died. And I remember not fully understanding at the age of 11, like, okay, he's gone somewhere, right? That's kind of how it was in my head. He's gone somewhere. And then I remember thinking, well, he'll come back, maybe. And a naive kind of view by an 11-year-old of death. Again, late bloomer, that's me. So I didn't really understand a lot of concepts in the world. But we moved into his house and we were surrounded by his art and his books and his magazines and his life. And he wasn't coming back. And I became rather obsessed with death. And that's what I wrote about. My poems, my songs, my short stories, they were mostly about death. And everybody thought I was a freak because I would get up there and I talk about death. And Mrs. Dantura said to me, you really should pick better topics because it's not appropriate to always talk about death. And that's where my writing journey, stage 1, ended. Because I was like, well, nobody's appreciating what I have to put out in the world. So why am I doing it? So I stopped. And then I got into high school and I had to do the same thing in an English class. But this time I wrote about death. I wrote about bullying. I wrote about I kept writing about the bad stuff that was happening to me. And my teacher there pulled me aside and said, you've actually got some talent here. Like the way you put together words, you put them together into, what's the word I'm looking for? You're very whimsical, and your composure of words is light years above where you should be. So I thought that was interesting, but I was more into music and DJing and things like that. So again, writing journey part 2 set aside. And then my writing journey had a third point, which was 9/11. So 9/11 happened, and I found that I was bursting with expression, but had no outlet for it. So I wrote a piece way ahead of where I probably it was almost a predictive piece. So if you remember when 9/11 happened, there was a lot of people that were, that's when the Muslim hate started big time in the Western world because, Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein, or not really Saddam, Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda and all that were tied to the Muslim faith intrinsically by politicians. And I definitely at that young age saw the problems with that. I saw how ruling through fear and divisiveness was going to be something that would collapse our world. Now, this is back when newspapers were important. So I wrote into my local newspaper. I wrote my concerns about this, my concerns about their reporting, my concerns about the things politicians were saying, my concerns about using such a traumatic event to label an entire people, 1 billion people, or maybe at that time, probably not 1 billion, but many, many millions of people as terrorists and fear mongering. And the paper actually printed it. So that was my first kind of published work. And I remember the reaction that people had to it. There were a lot of people that hit me up and said, that was really insightful. They wrote in and said that, or they send me texts or call me and say, I read your thing in the paper, totally agree. Some people didn't agree. And I just found, oh my God, I was having all these conversations around this topic, and suddenly words mattered. But then again, I set it aside. So the third part of my writing journey, I set it aside. Then I was working for this corporation named Canadians, and I was a very different hire for them. They're very corporate, very very buttoned up and blazered kind of a company. And I would prepare these reports, and people would say, "Wow, that was that was very whimsical of you." Can you just write the sobering points? I was like, man, I don't want to write sobering points. I want to write whimsically. So I started a blog. And that blog was basically me hypothesizing or theorizing or just really just thinking about what would have happened if I had gone left instead of gone right in dating, in jobs, in the way I spent money and all that. So then I would kind of create a fictional world where I went in a different direction. And it just so happened I knew a publisher through a series of events that are insane. I was sitting in IHOP for 16 hours, met this director, met this publisher. Christmas Day, I'm writing on my blog. He messages me, hey, what's up? Merry Christmas. What are you doing? I'm writing. What are you writing? I give him the link. And suddenly, this blog is turned into a fictional book. So a lot of it was like rewritten. The main character wasn't me anymore. It was this drunken guy. It kind of became this book, this really bad book. I wrote that. I released it. It locally and amongst my circles, it was well received. There are people that enjoyed the book, 100%. There are people that have told others that they enjoyed the book. So they're not telling it to me. I'm hearing it third party. I got, there's some reviews online that people had a positive read with it. But as a writer that's trying to be a writer, it wasn't good. And then I decided, I was like, hey, I have my works out there. It's interesting, this whole process of writing. But I want to release a book that's not about the subject matter of the first book. So then I wrote another book. It was called No Heroes. And it was better, but it wasn't great. And what ended up happening was I sold a bunch of those books too, did pretty well on that book as well. And I started thinking to myself, why aren't my books very good? Every time I wrote nonfiction on my blog or for a magazine or whatever it might be, my writing seemed to be better, but my fictional writing wasn't great. And then I stopped writing, just stopped. I only did nonfiction stuff on my blog or for magazines, but in terms of trying to be a writer, a career writer, I did not find that I had the talent for it, or so I thought. Now, this is where the lessons of instinct and learning come in. So, instinctually, I kept getting pulled into writing and I really enjoyed writing, but I kept putting it off because I felt like I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't very good, despite people telling me there was something there. And I was my own worst enemy in this regard. I was taking something that I was good at, and I wasn't doing the one thing that could have got me to where I wanted to go. Can you guess what it was? I'll give you a second. Learning. And I, for some reason, and maybe it's because I was a late bloomer in life. Maybe it's because I had too much ego when I was younger. Maybe it's because I was stubborn. It could be a million reasons why. But at the end of the day, I wasn't learning. And when you don't learn, you can't get better. You can experience and get a little bit better. But if you want to hack the system, then you should learn from the people that have done it before you. You should do the thing that you're trying to do that corresponds to it. So in this case, writing, reading. Authors John Grisham, Stephen King, Nicholas Sparks. I mean, I could go on for days about all the authors that I've read and I've enjoyed in fiction. And once I realized that I hadn't learned, and that was my biggest problem, I realized that that's why I was pushing my instinct to the side. I was going, well, these opportunities keep coming up. It keeps coming back in my life, but I'm not very good. So nope, not going to do it. But then so then something interesting happened. So this brings us to today. I got sick, as you guys know, in January, very sick. something I can't do anything about, one of those freak things. Everybody's probably going to have something that's totally freaky and not at all anticipated in their life medically. So I had that happen, and it forced me to drastically change my life. At the time, I was kind of thinking about writing a book based on my experience from matching with Shauna on Bumble to our first date. Actually, originally it was just going to be about the first date, but it kind of, as I was thinking about it, the idea kept evolving. And then I got sick, and I went, I think I would really like to write this book, but here's the thing. I have to write it well. This is a story that I care about. Now, it's also fiction. The book, it's called The Last First Date, and it's inspired by the dating situation that happened, the matching, and then our first date between Shauna and I. But it's not us. It's Sienna, the main female character, totally Shauna. The main character Beck, a little bit based on me for sure. My life experiences, some of my mentality, but definitely different in terms of the way he handles big decisions. There are some very true events, some very false events that happen in the book. It's inspired fiction, which is what great authors say. Don't write a character that doesn't have a basis in somebody you've met in reality, and don't write a story unless there is a shred of reality in it. I've heard many authors say that. So I wanted to do this story justice. And I started writing before I got sick, just kind of putting some ideas together, not really trying to take it overly serious at the moment, because again, I knew I wasn't very good. And then I stumbled across, let me bring it up here, because you know what? I think that this person deserves a mention here. So, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but I will now. So I'm going to tell you what started my journey of learning. I'm going to show you.
Get ready, because today we're going to talk.
That was audio. I'm going to show you the people that started my journey of writing. So basically, I was thinking about writing ideas. I'm like, I don't know, like it's good, but it's not great. I need to be better. And so I jumped into, so this video popped up one day. And I'm going to bring it up on the screen now. Let me just pull it up. There we go. So a video popped up from this guy, Brandon McNulty. And he's an author and an editor. He does a YouTube series on writing, right? So he's got all these different playlists. You can go in, you can look at writing. And he just presented his information in such a compelling way. He merged books with movies and TV, which I love because I love all three mediums. I would love to write for all three mediums. And I was like, whoa, wait, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. Holy crap, right? And then I found Abby Emmons, who was the second. So now I'm watching Brandon McNulty's videos, and YouTube suggests to me Abby Emmons. And I start looking at her videos. I'm like, oh my God, like, yes, that's validation there. Oh, yeah, I've thought of that before, but I didn't know if I should be doing that. Oh, that formatting thing. Oh, yeah, okay, that's how you do that. And then I was like, oh my God. So I was caught up in this world of learning how to write properly. And then through door number 3, was another YouTube channel. This one called Book Fox. So this is Book Fox here. Again, more about writing, more about marketing your book and all these sorts of things. And the more I watched, the more I learned, the more I realized I had the connective tissue that was required to be a writer. What I didn't have was the ability to connect the tissue together, to make it that connective tissue, to be able to generate a great book. So from there, I took a John Grisham masterclass. I took several masterclasses. I jumped in a couple writing groups. I really started taking this seriously. I started just diving into the world of writing because honestly, when you're as sick as I was, you have a lot of time on your hands. And if you got a lot of time in your hands, you're going to want to do something that you enjoy. I didn't want to just waste my time, right? And I recognized at that moment that I was denying my instinct because of the fact that I didn't learn enough to be able to consider myself good enough to write, to do the thing. Once I started getting through these courses, they validated ideas I had in my head that I needed validating. They challenged my knowledge. I learned new things. All of a sudden, the book was flowing out of me. Like I couldn't stop writing. I had to stop doing everything else I was doing because all I could think about was this book. And it poured out of my mind onto the pages. I mean, it took me April, May, June, July, August. So it took me 6 months to write the book. It is now in the hands of my editor, my awesome editor, Anna Henson. And she wrote to me. I posted this not too long ago on my Instagram, Better Call J Hull, if you want to follow me on Instagram. And let's see if I can find, I'll just read off to you what she wrote to me. Just wanted to update you that I finished my first read through and I'm thrilled with how it concluded. I'm going to leave a couple things out because it's spoilers. The narrator twist at the end really took me by surprise, and I think it adds a lot to the book in retrospect. It reminded me a lot of Nicholas Sparks' endings, an author I love, in a very positive way. Okay. And then the messages have been flowing since then. Beta readers have enjoyed it. My editor enjoys it. Anything I've read to Shauna, she enjoys it. And I realized, holy shit, I might actually be able to pull off being a writer. So before I get further into this story, I want to, if you don't know him already, I'm going to introduce you to somebody. He was on one of my, actually my favorite TV show of all time, Fringe. He was on General Hospital. He's done so many projects. Like I could list it for days. I'm pretty sure, even though he doesn't say it in this better moment, I'm pretty sure he's talking about General Hospital here. But he talks about following instinct and, upending your life.
Hey, Jay, how are you? Good to hear from you. I see that you're hosting a podcast. This is Sebastian Roché, by the way, to people who don't know. Anyway, I wanted to answer your question. I love that you have a podcast that helps, people and to do better with their lives and for others. And your question is, can you tell me a time when you had to do better and how you went about it? Yeah, there was a very crucial time in my life when my career had slowed down. I was going through a divorce. I didn't know what to do. I was living in New York. And interestingly enough, something came through, an offer came through, and I viewed it as a lowly offer and thought that I was not going to do it because I was, a serious actor. And eventually I relented and went with that offer to do this TV show. And it proved to be actually the best decision I made in my career. And one of the best decisions I made in my life because it changed my life entirely. In the sense that doing that show, I found my love for acting renewed. People treated me incredibly nicely, which renewed my confidence in my craft. And I started getting a much bigger fan base because of that TV show. And as a result, I was asked to stay on that TV show, and it completely changed my life in the sense that I decided to sell my house in New York and leave all those bad memories behind, and came to LA, found the beautiful house I live in now in LA, and completely changed the whole energy in which I was living in. So sometimes when something comes along your way that you don't think that you want to do, it might actually be the best thing that you do in your life, because it will change your life energy-wise. And, I didn't want to believe, I wanted to believe in what life had told me as an actor, that I had to follow certain precepts. But I don't think you need to follow anything at all, any presubscribed way of living. You have to go with your instinct. And that's when I really decided, that's when I realized that I had to do better. And by making a difficult decision, or a decision that went against my presupposed way of thinking, I actually bettered my life. And I went about it with full force. I finally decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to plunge into it, sold my house, bought a house here, moved to California, completely changed my life, my career, made me a happier man. I met my wife, my actual wife, my second wife here. And I'm living the dream, really, thanks to the decision I made at a time when things were not going that well, but I knew I had to do better. So I hope that answers your question. All the best to you, and keep doing that podcast. All the best. Take care, Jay.
So, Sebastian Roché, thank you so much for that better moment. Big fan, and big fan of what you just said. So he talks about where he had to make a decision, follow his instinct, and do better by doing something that was uncomfortable, something that he hadn't considered before. And that's what I ended up doing. So I went full tilt into writing this book, into the last first date. And like I said, it's with my editor now. I'm having my release party February 16th, 2025, with at a restaurant that's actually featured in the book. And then March 1st, these are the tentative dates. Things can change. March 1st, it'll be released to the public. Pre-order will go on sale soon. Will I make it as a writer? I don't know. But I can tell you I'm willing to move in this direction now, because I finally believe I have the necessary skills to do it. Now, writing is kind of a dream, right? It's like one of those things where you go, a lot of people don't consider it a real job, right? They're like, well, you're not, unless you're building something, like a house or you're, a lot of people just don't consider the arts to be real work. But when it comes to it, you are building something, you're building a world, and you're building a world that someone can escape into, get hope from. My stories I'm trying to write, while this one is a rom-dram, which is romantic drama, I'm trying to build in some truth, something that makes people go, oh, yeah, and makes you think, and maybe makes you better. Since that's my whole mission in life now, is being better and doing better. So, there is some art that's like, okay, it's nice, but it's not really contributing anything. I'm really hoping that my books can contribute. But I had to do two things to make this work, to make this happen for me. The first being I had to learn so that I could understand why I wasn't following my instinct. There are a lot of times in your life when you go, oh, I wish I'd followed my instinct. Why didn't I follow my instinct? I was right. So a couple things about that. The first is, either you're not following your instinct because you don't have enough confidence in yourself, which means you need to learn or you need to get better at that thing to be able to get the confidence to follow your instinct. Because following your instinct requires a ton of confidence. Or you are not following your instincts despite knowing it's right. And the reason you're doing that has a lot to do with the fact that you do not have we'll call this, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a symbiotic relationship with yourself. It might not come from confidence. In this case, it might just come from your inability to recognize your instinct because you're not in tune with yourself enough. Oh, it sounds so hooey. But it's a real thing for a lot of people. I think I had kind of both, right? I didn't have confidence in my writing because I did nothing to learn how to write, And instinctively I knew, okay, you should be writing, but you're terrible at writing. Or not terrible, but you're not great at writing. I should never say I was terrible. I don't think I was ever a terrible writer. I was a work in progress, but I wasn't progressing. I was stuck. I was a work in. And not until fairly recently did I activate the P in that, the progress. So now I write and I go, this could be what I do with my life. Very challenging in these times. A lot of self-published authors out there, a lot of AI crap coming out, a lot of people that think they're writers that, again, are like me. They don't really understand what it takes. They don't do the learning, so they're not great writers. I'm in writer groups all the time, and these things get posted. I'm like, oh my god! Like, take a step back and do a little bit of learning because it's so critical to your success. But hopefully they will. I'm not saying they're always going to be bad. I'm just saying, I did it too, and I mean, it's amazing those people sometimes you can follow your instinct without having confidence in yourself. But I would say that if you're doing that, like what I did with writing in the beginning, where I followed my instinct and I kept writing, but then I kept setting it aside. But that was because I lacked the confidence. So don't do it. First, learn and experience so that you can get the confidence so that you can continue on. My false starts probably set me back 10, 20 years in writing, right? If I just acknowledge the fact that if I learn, I will embrace my instinct, which will allow me to do better in this, then I probably have 15, 20 books out by now. God knows I have that many concepts written down. So, long story short, if you find that you're not following your instincts, you're probably not following your instincts because you don't have confidence or you have some unfinished business with your personal development. If you're following your instincts but yet falling off, that means you need to learn more. You need to embrace that ability to absorb as much information as possible. Look at the people that have done it before you and chart your own path with knowledge and education behind you. The education system gets shit on all the time, and rightfully so in a lot of cases. But learning to any degree will always improve you. So if you are looking to do better and you want to follow your instinct, then you should 100%. You should start looking at why you're not following your instinct. You should look at whether you know enough in this topic, whether you feel confident in this topic. And if you don't, then learn. Like, just constantly learn. Just always learn. I mean, I went through every single video on those 3 YouTube channels. I went through every writing masterclass. I joined groups. I nonstop learned while writing. And what really frustrated me was I'm like, okay, I've learned enough. I'm going to go. And I learned something new. I'm like, oh, now I need to go back to the beginning. There's a certain point too where learning can become destructive because all you're doing is learning and not doing. Get to the point. This is actually very valuable. So if you're doing that, here's how you get out of that trap. You want to look at something at the beginning before you started the learning that you did. Okay. So in this case, writing, looking at a chapter and saying, okay, this is what my chapters looked like in 7 Deadly Women and No Heroes. Now, looking at the new chapters, unedited, that you're writing, not unedited as in you didn't go back and correct some of your mistakes, but unedited in terms of you haven't given it to an editor, it's not published, anything like that, and compare the two. If you're unedited writing or your learning curve for whatever it is you're trying to do is so much better than what you were doing when you started, then you're there. Now's the time to implement. You're always going to learn. But if you spend all your time learning, you're never going to implement. And all you'll be is a guy or girl or whatever who's very smart about writing. Maybe you could teach, because they say those who can't do teach. Maybe that's what's behind that. Maybe the teachers are the people that didn't in a large percentage of the cases, didn't implement. They just kept learning, and they end up with all this knowledge in their head, and they had to burst with it, and they did, but they ended up lacking the confidence because they never thought of looking at their works in the beginning, looking at their works now, and saying, "Wow, I'm so much better. I should go." They thought that they had to know everything before proceeding, which you can never know everything. Every single day, I learned something new about writing. So, anyway, the moral of the story is, follow your instinct. But if you find you're falling off, it's probably because you don't know enough about the topic. So dive into learning, okay? That will make you better in what you're trying to do. I also wanted to end off this episode. I want to talk about something that I saw in the news recently. It was a story about someone doing better. And that someone was Jon Bon Jovi. Jon Bon Jovi talked a woman off of a ledge, literally. Not figuratively, not like we generally talk about these things. He literally, with another woman, I don't know the other woman's name, but you can see them in the video. Here's Jon Bon Jovi. Here's the other woman. Here is the woman that was staying on a ledge that was going to jump off of a bridge. And you know, he stood there with this woman, and they talked to the woman that was on the ledge, and they got her to come over the ledge, which is pretty remarkable. That is a great thing to do. I mean, he was there. So I'll read you the story quickly, pieces of it. Basically, the police are praising him because he helped this woman in distress on a bridge in Nashville, Tennessee. There's video of it. He was there shooting a music video on the bridge. You can see that there's he basically saw there's this woman in the background. So, you know, Jon Bon Jovi walks over to the woman with someone else on his team, and he just said hello, and he started talking to her. And after about a minute, Bon Jovi walks to the woman, and with the help of another woman, the pair get her back on the pedestrian walkway on the bridge. Other people walk over after the woman is safe, and Bon Jovi embraces her in a hug. A few minutes later, the police footage shows Bon Jovi leaving the bridge with her. Very cool story. So, in the way this is making the world a better place. He took time. So Jon Bon Jovi, one of the most successful rock acts, Bon Jovi of all time, hit after hit after hit, from 80s hair rock all the way to ballads like Bed of Roses and all that. And he's on this bridge doing this music video, and a lot of people are just oblivious to what's happening around them. And everybody's got a story, everybody's got their struggle, everybody's got their plight. And he goes over, takes a break. And to understand, when you're on a set filming, taking a break is not, an unscheduled break is not something a lot of people are willing to do. It's a big problem for directors, producers. They start screaming at you, get back to set, we are on a schedule. You know, we only have so much daylight. And so he just walked over and made this woman's life better by whatever he said to her, made her realize in that moment killing herself was not the road to go down, was not the path to follow. And I just thought it was a really cool story, so I wanted to share it with you guys. Jon Bon Jovi making the world a better place by observing around him, seeing someone in distress and helping them and saving a life in the process. So cool story. Thanks, John. All right, so that is it for this episode of Better. Like I said, if you liked it, if you found value in it, please spread the word. We've got these new channels. We're starting at 0, basically, and we'd love to get it out there. And only by you getting out there will the algorithm continue to push us further, and then this podcast will be seen by millions of people, which would be fantastic. I would love that, because as I want to be a writer and a podcaster. Those are the two things I want to do. I'm also building an app. It's kind of a backup plan because it's the more proper, stable way to make a living. But you know, I'm doing all these things, these 3 things, and these are the 3 things that I'm going to put my focus into. But I would really love to write and podcast. The only way that happens is if this podcast spreads out and people buy my books. But that's the story for another day. All right, talk to you guys later. Peace. Thanks for checking out Better. If you got to the end, it must mean you liked the episode, right? So how about 5 stars? Maybe a sub, maybe a share. Great universal comment points. And good luck on your better journey.